After the death of Captain Haig, the Fire Force stands shaken as the White Clads and Sho emerge from the shadows with unknown intentions. Company 8 must now embark on their most dangerous mission yet, rescuing their captain from the heart of enemy territory. Just what sinister plans do the White Clads have in motion? Let's find out. The members of the White Clad gathered on the rooftop. Haumea encouraged them to change the empire to its rightful state. Meanwhile, Sho remained quiet behind her. In Kareem's room, he stood staring at a picture of him and his friends. He thought about how the White Clad was becoming extreme now. He also realized that his companion Rekka was part of that group. He remembered when they were all together, Rekka would lead their runs while chanting Say. Kareem told him to stop shouting, saying they would have to run an extra 10 kilometers. Rekka didn't care and remained energetic in his running. Despite being sweaty, he declared that even though it was always hot, their faith and fighting spirit would never fade. Isn't that a great thing? Rekka asked. Kareem and Huiyin agreed with him. After that, when the three were meditating, Rekka said that as priests of Company 1, they should achieve upright and honest faith. Kareem asked if he meant unwavering faith. Rekka agreed, saying their faith in the sun god must never waver. That was why they had trustworthy comrades watching their backs. Huiyin commented that they really couldn't meditate without talking. It was time for their confessions. Rekka went first, confessing that he ate too much and that it was getting too hot outside. He said it was inexcusable. When it was Kareem's turn, he confessed to spending a large sum of money on a customized cooling pipe. As for Huiyin, he confessed that he stayed up late reading, which affected his daily routine. Back in the present, as Kareem was about to confess, he thought about how Rekka had entrusted that to them. When the priest told him to confess, he admitted to turning his precious friend into ice. The priest on the other side recognized him and asked if he was Kareem. In his thoughts, he was curious about what was going through Rekka's mind when he deceived them. Moving to the balcony, he was talking with Huiyin, who asked if he was still thinking about what happened to Rekka. Kareem didn't deny it. He couldn't stop wondering what happened and how Rekka became part of the White Clad. He added that they were against Rekka's holy soul teachings, so he thought Rekka hadn't trusted them. Huiyin responded that while Rekka might have been a priest like them, he was still part of the White Clad. Neither was wrong. Kareem thought Rekka wasn't the type of person who could separate his true intentions so cleverly. According to Huiyin, whether it was the Holy Soul teachings or the White Clad, they all believed in one thing, the sun god. Suddenly, someone arrived saying that Captain Burns was summoning them both, which interrupted their conversation. When they joined their captain, they were surprised to learn they were going to meet with the Imperial Majesty. Burns replied that they were being summoned immediately. They were also joined by another priest, Onyengo. Huiyin asked about the reason for their summons. Kareem thought that something major must have happened. In the Curia of the Holy Soul Temple, Imperial Majesty Raffles was waiting. A priest beside him, addressing him as Your Holiness, announced that the members of Company 1 were arriving. According to Raffles, people in the Tokyo Empire were beginning to fear the spontaneous human combustions following the Great Cataclysm. Therefore, now more than ever, they needed to be reborn and united. The scene shifted to Special Fire Force Cathedral 8. Hinawa was speaking with their captain, Obi, saying that due to their investigation, the number of other companies supporting them had increased. Even members of Company 7 and Hajima were now sharing their same goal. Obi responded that they had managed to secure cooperation from each Special Fire Force. Thus, it was time to combine their strengths and bring down the White Clads. Maki was with them and remarked that the Fire Force was finally united. Back to Captain Burns. As they were entering the Holy Soul Temple, Raffles greeted them when the doors opened. He said he had been waiting for Captain Leonard Burns. When asked about what he wanted to discuss, Raffles replied that the Empire was now kept in line thanks to their efforts. However, now more than ever, they needed to unite. For the Empire's welfare and for the sake of the Sun God. The priests listened quietly when he said they should unite with them. Captain Burns was shocked when he realized Raffles was referring to the white-clad members, who were also present inside the temple. Raffles clarified that they were disciples of the Sun God, who possessed the power of a Dala burst. Captain Burns shouted and called them enemies of the Empire. So, he called the Imperial Majesty to move closer to them. Haumea asked Burns if it was really strange to see them there. Kareem answered that of course it was, since they belonged underground. Haumea approached and said they had just returned to where they need to be. Burns became angry and called them traitors. He immediately ordered them to leave. At the Holy Soul Temple, the priests were caught off guard seeing their enemies there. Karen told Haumea to get behind him, but she responded that it was fine, as they were there for serious discussion. While staring at Sho, Burns thought he must be Kasakabe's brother. Haumea revealed that they were allied with the Imperial King, the very backbone of the Holy Soul Temple. She insisted they hadn't come to fight anyone, they only wanted to talk. Kareem questioned why they needed to enter that place. Huoyin suggested it was exactly as they said. They were allies with the Imperial King. Burns, curious, asked what exactly they wanted to discuss if not to fight. Haumea used her talking head ability, which could read others' thoughts. From Burns' mind, she read the words Otherworld, Evangelist, God, Virgin Mary, and Adala Link. She asked Burns if he wasn't already aware. When he questioned what she meant, she said his right eye was proof. Haumea continued reading his thoughts, recognition, fear, and sense of duty. This caused Burns' right eye to sting, while Kareem and the others remained silent. Haumea believed he had witnessed the truth of this world, though technically she couldn't confirm it. She said all devout priests of the temple and they should share the same objective. Kareem couldn't believe her words and tried to stop her, but when Haumea read resentment in his thoughts, she mentioned Rekha Hashemiya's name, catching him off guard. She explained that Rekha was a devout disciple who died during his mission. Kareem retorted that they had killed him. However, Haumea responded that his sacrifice was necessary for their objective. Kareem demanded to know what objective she meant, calling them mere murderers. Because of this, Haumea questioned the importance of human-created concepts like ethics. While talking to him, she read resistance and confusion in Kareem's thoughts. Kareem asked if it wasn't divine revelation, dismissing her words as nonsense. She questioned whether he couldn't feel that the words they transmitted were the very same words spoken by God, the very fragments of the universe's will. Burns remained silent as he recalled the time he met the evangelist. According to Kareem, they knew their group's goal. They wanted to recreate the Great Cataclysm. Haumea responded that it was merely the mechanism that would bring about the great outcome. Raffles added that the Holy Soul Temple was simply following the Sun God's will. This made Huoyin realize that their goal wasn't the Great Cataclysm itself. Onyango pondered about the Sun God's will. Haumea descended to get closer to Captain Burns. She said his right eye was taken as payment for what he had seen. She continued analyzing his thoughts, picking up key words like otherworld, truth, God, hell, law, and others. Because of this, she declared they couldn't allow their world to remain in its current state. Burns asked what their intention was behind all this, and she answered, light. The water star referring to Earth should become the new sun, just like the old sun. Huoyin commented that it was absurd. Kareem then asked if they really intended to burn down their nation, but Haumea called out to Burns, asking him to show his devotion. She claimed he must have developed a near super sense of the otherworld by now. Burns paused and thought. Haumea continued, telling him to show his overwhelming understanding and unwavering devotion. She said human wisdom no longer mattered now. She was certain he could feel the sacred madness. Burns thought of the evangelist and knelt down. Haumea succeeded in manipulating him according to his thoughts and feelings. Because of this, only conversion remained in Burns' mind. The scene then shifted to the Tokyo Fire Defense Agency building, where Obi was speaking with their chief. He reported that Asakusa and Hajime had promised to cooperate with them. The chief asked if this meant the Empire would finally be united. Obi was certain their relationship would be stronger now. The chief praised him, calling it excellent work. The Special Fire Forces were the heart of the Empire, so it was common sense for them to be unified. Because of this, they were one step closer to solving the mystery behind spontaneous human combustion. Obi responded that it had taken some time since Company 8 was formed, but they had finally reached that point. He thanked the chief for everything. The chief returned the gratitude, saying Obi had helped unite the Empire together. However, Obi mentioned they still had much to fix. They then heard footsteps from outside. The chief was curious about the noise. Obi became alert and told the chief to stay behind him. When the door opened, members of the Tokyo Imperial Army appeared, apologizing for the intrusion. Obi said he was in the middle of giving a mission report to the chief and asked what was happening. The army responded that they didn't want to be rough, so he should act like an adult and comply. Another added that they were taking Akitaro Obi in as a potential suspect. Therefore, he shouldn't resist, and they didn't want to use handcuffs. The chief couldn't believe hearing he was a suspect and asked what that meant. Obi said it was okay, and there might be a mistake. He then asked him to inform Hinawa to come there immediately. Before he could finish what he was saying, he was shocked to see white-clad members there, and so he questioned what they were doing there. A flashback shows when Company 8 was founded. Obi occupied what appeared to be an old cathedral, examining its potential. The building was abandoned and unused, covered in dust and dirt, causing him to cough while cleaning. Hinawa was with him then, noting that there were still many things left behind that they could use. Obi thought that all they really needed were uniforms, equipment, and the matchbox, their vehicle. After wringing out a used cleaning cloth, Obi asked about Hinawa's life after quitting the army. Hinawa replied that not much had changed. Obi admitted that he didn't know much about Hinawa personally, so he was curious if Hinawa had any family. Hinawa shared that his father raised him alone, but he had passed away last year. This made Obi thoughtful, and he suddenly asked if Hinawa had a girlfriend, which startled him. Obi then wondered if he should have asked about a boyfriend instead, clarifying that he wasn't prejudiced. Hinawa responded that he didn't have either, as he wasn't interested in having a lover. He couldn't imagine having one given their job where they could die at any time. Obi told him he shouldn't say such things. He then confirmed if Hinawa was really sure about joining Company 8. Hinawa hadn't expected it to be such a weird company and asked if he could quit, but Obi firmly replied that he couldn't. Hinawa clarified that Company 8 was an outsider unit meant to investigate other companies, asking if that made Obi uneasy. He said that it actually suited a loner like him better. Obi explained that depending on what happens, they might be considered traitors to the Empire. Therefore, they couldn't work with people who undervalued their own lives. Obi needed extremely strong fighters who valued both their own lives and others, and he couldn't wait to see what Company 8 becomes. Hinawa remarked that Obi seemed like both a king and father to Company 8, which made Obi feel pressured. However, Obi thought he was old enough to have children. Hinawa cheered him up, calling him captain, knowing he would make Company 8 into a family. Obi was excited about this, declaring that would be their castle. From that day forward, they would save humanity. Back in the present, Shinra and his companions couldn't believe that their captain had been arrested. Hinawa mentioned that the army had taken him while he was giving a report to the chief. Currently, he was being detained by guards. He had also heard that the White-Clads were now working with the army. Therefore, it was safe to say they had captured the captain. Iris couldn't believe this. Maki asked why they would arrest him, and Tamaki wondered how the White-Clads came to work with the army. Hinawa replied that it was a mystery how deeply they had infiltrated the country. However, they could assume their goal was to capture Shinra and his Adala burst. Shinra remained quiet when Arthur suddenly said draw. He suggested sacrificing Shinra to summon their captain. Shinra was puzzled, although he admitted he was about to suggest the same thing. Hinawa refused this idea. He stated that Company 8 would never sell out any of their members. Those were Captain Obi's own words. Arthur responded that they would honor that and just throw Shinra off the deck instead. Shinra asked if Arthur really wanted him gone that badly. Licht interjected, saying if they didn't decide soon, the army would arrive. Hinawa then stated that whoever wanted to stay could do so. Licht replied that he was already starting preparations to rescue the captain. Either way, Hinawa noted they would have to fight against the Imperial King's dogs. Maki couldn't believe his decision and knew what that meant. However, Hinawa accepted that he would become a traitor. He clarified that this was his personal decision, not a command. If they wanted to leave, they were free to do so. He added that he wouldn't be their lieutenant anymore once he became a traitor. In response, they all simultaneously declared they would join him. Arthur stated that the night would come too. Both Shinra and Vulcan said they would obviously help rescue the captain. They insisted he would always be their lieutenant. Iris also agreed, joining in with their plan. Suddenly, Hinawa shouted and silenced everyone, surprising them. Their decision then made him smile. He then told Maki that she had somewhere else she could go. However, Maki had already decided she was part of Company 8. She warned that if he had anything more to say about it, she would be extremely angry with him. Meanwhile, Tamaki was still contemplating. Shinra told her she had a family, so she didn't need to do this. She replied that while she didn't want to become a traitor, weren't they all going together? So, she raised her hand and said she would join too. When Shinra asked if she was sure, she responded that she wasn't doing it just to follow everyone else. It wasn't because she was weak-willed either. She was declaring with strong will that because everyone was going, she would go too. Shinra replied that what she just said something weak, even though she said it strongly. With everyone decided, Hinawa declared that they were the Special Fire Force, and they were always ready. Everyone agreed, including Lisa, who had no idea what was happening, but said she would go wherever Vulcan went. They were all determined to get their captain back. Licht emphasized that Companies 1 and 2 would become their enemies since they were tied to the Empire. Therefore, it seemed Company 8 would be on its own. Nevertheless, none of them quit, and he hadn't expected anything less from them. Hinawa said this was because they were family. When asked about his decision, Licht replied that Company 8 was close to understanding the mystery of human combustion. He had known from the beginning that a day would come when they would have to fight the entire world. And now that they would become world traders, their next opponent would be the Tokyo Empire. Shifting to the prison cell, a guard was curious about how Obi was doing inside and if he was under control. Another replied that he was fine, but he had been doing the same thing for a while. They were referring to his push-ups and training in the cell. Obi waved through the bars and requested some water. The guard became irritated and responded that he wasn't a waiter. He would only get water at designated times. Obi replied that he would die of dehydration at this rate. The guard retorted that it was his own fault since he chose to work out. Obi clarified that if he couldn't leave, he would continue training out of boredom and to get stronger. After their conversation, he sat down to think. He was curious about what was happening outside and said he was counting on Hinawa and Company 8. Outside, news had broken that the captain of Special Fire Force Company 8, Akatarv Obi, had been arrested for kidnapping Shinra Kasakabe, the Adala burst wielder known as the Holy Flame. The news anchor added that other Company 8 members were on the run with Shinra. People couldn't believe they would resort to kidnapping someone with the Holy Flame. One person said it's scary to think they were a sanctioned fire force. Currently, the news reported that the Imperial Army was still searching for Company 8 members as persons of interest. Members of Company 4 also watched the news. While eating, Karen said it was hard to believe Company 8 would do such a thing. But Ogun was certain they wouldn't do it, which puzzled Karen. Ogun thought something weird was happening. Meanwhile, at Company 5, the 5th Angels 3 were busy extinguishing bodies and purifying the souls of infernals. When they heard about a fire reported from the Tarago district, Hibana ordered her troops to go there immediately, and they complied. She was talking with Conehead, who mentioned that Company 8's jurisdiction was in shambles now that they were gone. Hibana just commented, "Gravelate. What a mess." Conehead wondered why she didn't seem pleased about the absence of Company 8's prying eyes. She clarified that wasn't it. It just meant less gravel for her to kick around. Conehead expressed worry for her, knowing she had been helping that group behind the scenes. Hibana remained silent. Conehead added that the situation had changed now that Company 8 were traitors who had turned their backs on the Empire. Therefore, she shouldn't help them anymore. The scene shifted to the Asakusa district, where Benimaru was walking around. Someone called out to him about having a fresh catch and invited him to come by at night, but he ignored him. The person wondered what was wrong with him. When he returned home, Conroe greeted him with news about Company 8, though Benimaru already knew. Conroe added that, as he feared, the whole country had united for the wrong reasons. When asked if he had heard from them, Conroe replied no, certain they wouldn't want to cause sparks in Asakusa. Benimaru responded that they were surrounded by a wall of fire in the form of their enemies. The search for Company 8 members continued without success. A leader ordered them to gather eyewitness statements to determine their hiding place. They were certain someone must have seen them since they were escaping using the matchbox. They were ordered to do everything possible to find them quickly. Meanwhile, Company 8 members were shown hiding their matchbox somewhere. They were all hiding together while Hinawa scouted the surroundings. He noted they were being searched for everywhere. Vulcan reported that he had finished hiding their matchbox. Hinawa then mentioned it's only a matter of time before they are found. Tamaki had an unusual expression, prompting Shinra to ask what was wrong. He asked if she finally understood their situation and whether she regretted her decision. She replied that she was taken in with a strong will and made to come along. Shinra commented that her expression was scary. Licht then scratched his head and remarked that while they were professionals at prayers and extinguishing fires, he thought they knew nothing about evading the law. Vulcan was surprised by his attitude and reminded him that he came from Hijima. Licht just grinned and asked if they remembered when the captain questioned whether he sided with Company 8 or Hijima. Back then, he couldn't answer. They were surprised when he revealed that, in truth, he hadn't taken any side. He was an outlaw, like a certain someone. He claimed to know more about being an outlaw than all of them combined. While he was speaking, someone was on the other side of the tree, and Shinra was surprised when Joker emerged and greeted them. Shinra couldn't believe it, while Joker responded that he was finally there, calling him Devil. Licht explained that if Company 8 were the heroes fighting spontaneous human combustion on the surface, he and Joker were the ones fighting in the shadows. He and Joker could be called anti-heroes. Joker walked forward and said if they didn't want to be found, they should follow him. He would teach them how to shake off the bad guys. Shinra stopped him and asked why they should trust him. They didn't even have any idea who he was. Joker simply replied that they were free to get caught if that's what they wanted. This silenced Shinra, who only commented that he had a really rough style. Joker responded that darkness was like a garden to him. Therefore, he wore his most comfortable clothes when walking there. When Hinawa asked where he was taking them, Joker just looked at an open artistic manhole cover and said it was time for them to decide whether they wanted to fall into darkness. Hinawa asked again where they would be taken, and Joker replied that Company 8 arrived quite late. Since they were all traitors now, he and Licht wouldn't be lonely anymore. As outlaws, they would learn to walk in darkness. Therefore, he gave them a choice between the circle of light or wherever the circle of darkness might lead them. Shinra was torn because of this, but Joker pressed on, asking if they had any other choice. The members of Company 8 fell silent, knowing they had nowhere else to go except underground. So, one by one, they descended to escape there. Shinra was surprised to see the abandoned drainage system below, and Tamaki couldn't believe that people lived in such places. Licht clarified that their secret base had air conditioning, so they shouldn't worry about the smell. Shortly after, they arrived at the place Joker mentioned. Shinra was surprised because it had signage, so it wasn't really hidden. However, Joker explained that this place wasn't listed on any map and this space had been forgotten. Licht added that there were people like them who stayed underground because they had lost their place above. He opened the door and welcomed them to what he called their castle. Hinawa looked around cautiously with his gun ready, prompting Licht to say that while he understood the precaution, he hoped they would trust them. He said he believed in all of Company 8. Meanwhile, Joker sat at his office table and asked what they should do first. Shinra said they had no time to waste and should rescue Captain Obi. Arthur added that they needed to hurry. However, Hinawa elbowed them in the head and told them to settle down. On the side, Tamaki and Iris were curious about the contents of the glass containers in the cabinet. Meanwhile, Vulcan asked how they would rescue their captain. Hinawa explained that their enemy now was the Tokyo Empire. The very nation was their enemy, and it was extremely powerful. Therefore, they should start by gathering information. They needed to know things like the number of enemies and their weapons before they could formulate a rescue plan for their captain. Licht added that they should start with Captain Obi, since Joker had learned of his location. Joker said they would look for that place, where the most violent criminals and terrorists of the Tokyo Empire were held. He was referring to Fuchu Prison. Meanwhile, Captain Burns was deep in thought while walking, contemplating the sun god. He had learned of its undeniable existence before. Haumea then appeared before him. Burns mentioned that Akitara Obi had been captured. Haumea responded that she wanted to leave him brainwashed since he was somewhat iffy about following them immediately. But it seemed he had finally accepted them. Burns added that as a citizen and priest, His sense of duty had compelled him to work for the church. However, since experiencing the Adala link, his faith in the church began to waver. He felt that the evangelist was God, and whatever faith the evangelist had was the true one. Remembering the evangelist, he said he was no longer driven by duty alone, because he had seen the God they needed to believe in with all their hearts. Haumea could read his thoughts and noted that he didn't seem to be lying. If so, she asked if he was willing to violate humanity for the evangelist. He replied that traveling on God's path was his role as a priest. Human combustion was just one of the tests given to mankind to bring them closer to the sun, and whoever passed would become one with the sun and become flames themselves. With that purpose in mind, he asked if that was why they needed Shinra Kusakabe. Haumea replied that they only needed to trap Obi as bait. He was part of what was necessary to cultivate Shinra's Adala burst, and she thought it was time to give him the big treat. Burns signed and said they would give the satisfaction of giving his life to the sun god and returning to flames. He ordered the use of the bug on Akitara Obi, which Shinra heard through his Adala link. Concern was evident on Shinra's face, shown by his peculiar smile when anxious. Hinawa said they needed to be careful. Their information gathering should be secret, and they needed to make a plan. But Shinra interrupted, saying they had no time for that. When asked what the problem was, he said he saw Burns in the Adala link. This made Licht curious. Meanwhile, at the prison, a white-clad visited Obi. When asked what they wanted, she introduced herself as Gold the Butcher. But Obi didn't care about her name and told her to leave. She replied that he couldn't buy him with gold since she's already made of it. She wouldn't let him out even if he had mountains of it. She then took out a small bottle containing a bug and said, maybe if he became an infernal. She then levitated the bottle with the bug. Back at the secret base, the equipment was ready. Vulcan stated that their preparations were complete, though this was all the equipment they had. If Shinra's vision was correct, they had no time to waste, Hinawa added. Shinra grew worried thinking about Burns saying they would use the bug, meaning they would turn their captain into an infernal. As they prepared, Hinawa told Joker and Shinra they were counting on them. Joker replied that they would go ahead to Fuchu as planned, and the others confirmed they would follow. Joker headed out on his motorcycle, while Shinra used his ability to quickly reach their captain. Hinawa led those who remained behind. Meanwhile, Maki thanked Vulcan because even in their state of emergency, they were able to prepare equipment thanks to him. He simply replied that he was an engineer. After all, Arthur prepared his Excalibur, which prompted Maki to ask if it wasn't too light, since that sword was his only equipment. Arthur responded that it was because he was a knight. This made Maki ask Tamaki if Arthur had managed to reach Superfire while they were training in Asakusa. She was also curious because Shinra had told them about his death vision, but wondered about Arthur's experience. Arthur mentioned that he had already spoken with Shinra about it, and he seemed surprised. He had told Shinra that he just needed to imagine his saved data with the highest abilities being erased. Shinra had replied that if it was that simple, he wouldn't have needed to train. Maki commented that he was both a genius and an idiot, with a paper-thin difference between the two. Tamaki agreed and called him a stupid genius. Arthur just smiled at this and suddenly noticed something on the ground, a lizard walking by. He then wondered if it was the offspring of a dragon. If so, he couldn't let it pass. It would be an honor for a knight to earn the title of Dragon Slayer. He imagined himself as a knight facing a massive dragon. Maki remarked that the Superfire death vision was pretty serious. One could become an expert without trying, but Tamaki wasn't convinced about this. On the other hand, Vulcan was curious if they would just walk to Fuchu, saying that would take some time. Licht replied that Joker was using their nether-dedicated vehicle to go ahead. Nevertheless, he assured them they would reach Fuchu quickly. Maki thought they would go there secretly, but they would still pass through the nether. Hinawa then asked if they could trust Joker. Licht was surprised that he still didn't trust him. He said that if Hinawa trusted him, then he should also believe in Joker. Besides, he was Tokyo's anti-hero. While heading to Fuchu, Shinra asked Joker if they were forming an alliance there. Joker reminded him of when he asked them to join during the rookie games. He thought it was late to ask that now. Shinra knew he still didn't trust him, but Joker said that was fine. The world, their country, and people weren't easy to trust. This made Shinra curious about why he was cooperating with them. Joker said it was simple. As someone who lived in darkness, he could call it a sixth sense. They couldn't lose because Obi is what the country needed most. He was the real deal, and someone like him was capable of changing darkness to light. Shinra questioned this. Joker added that neither the Holy Soul Temple nor the Sun God could do that. However, the light he encountered wasn't just in Obi, but in Shinra as well. Shinra was puzzled by this statement. Joker continued, saying many great enemies awaited them at the prison, like Leonard Burns and the Butcher Gang that killed Haig. If the Pillars had a guardian, he would serve as that for Shinra. But Shinra replied that he didn't need to worry anymore because he had gotten stronger in Asakusa. He confidently stated that he could handle him or Captain Burns now. When Joker asked if he could also handle Benimaru, Shinra replied no way. At Fuchu, Gold was counting gold coins. She made them float one by one, and after counting to 5, mentioned the golden bug. She said it was shining and was the perfect bug. A guard there noticed her floating coins. He asked what kind of ignition powers allowed her to do that. She threw a gold coin in the guard's direction, which landed in his palm. Gold said that money moves everything, both emotionally and physically. Many people had died for monetary gain, but for her, that wasn't why she killed. When the guard asked if not for that then for what, she replied that she just gave them despair. The scene shifted to white-clad members talking in a room. Gold told her companions that the bug for Obi has been chosen. One of them rushed her because Company 8 would surely act quickly. Their companions said whatever, they'd just kill whoever showed up. But Gold insisted they shouldn't underestimate them. One of that group's members had defeated Assault. One wondered if she was referring to the bloody fire blast. She agreed and said she heard it was one of their new recruits. They pondered this, saying Assault was also a butcher before. He was strong enough to cleanse Demon Infernals alone. They couldn't believe it because of that. Gold said Assault was strong, but told him not to fail like he did. He then got annoyed because she of all people said that to him. He declared that in his presence, everything fall before him. Or maybe she had forgotten that since butchering Company 4's captain had gone to her head. She replied that she hadn't. He asked who she thought was Butcher refers to. He answered it was him, and suddenly the place where they were shook. One commented that it looked like it would be fun. Another said he seemed strong. Back to Burns, while he was just looking outside, he noticed they had arrived. He was referring to Shinra and Joker who were on a mission to save Obi. Joker said it was time to play as heroes, but Shinra replied that they weren't playing heroes there. They were the heroes themselves. To save Captain Obi, Shinra and Joker have infiltrated the Fuchu prison, but Captain Burns and Haumea were waiting for them. Burns said that Company 8 was on their way, and he would handle them, so he asked Haumea if her and her group could withdraw from there. He said he would take care of the fourth pillar, and Haumea agreed, saying she would tell the butchers to leave Shinra to him. On the other hand, Joker and Shinra had arrived at Fuchu prison, and Joker was looking at something on the roof, which made Shinra look up as well. He wondered why Captain Burns was helping the white-clad clan, and he was standing on top of the Fuchu prison roof. Burns looked at them and made eye contact with Joker, who had a very serious expression. At that moment, Shinra asked why Captain Burns was there, and he replied that up until that point, he had lived by devoting all his life to God as part of his mission. However, since experiencing the Adala link, he had begun to doubt the God he used to believe in. But now, he said, he could feel an unquestionable God in the presence of the evangelist, and such truth was believable, in which case, only devoting himself to that God will be how he lives on. Joker said that Burns was right that the Adala was like the world of God, but for someone like him who hadn't pledged anything to God, he didn't think that was justice. According to Shinra, the White Hoods had caused the Great Cataclysm and were trying to destroy the world. Captain Burns replied that after ruin comes rebirth, and destruction is not the end. In front of God, things like human reasoning are nothing but ego. Shinra then asked what would happen to all the people in Tokyo that Captain Burns had saved so far, but Burns just snapped his fingers in reply. After that, Burns showed them Captain Obi chained to what looked like a cross, with a white-clad member guarding him. Shinra was seething with anger at what he saw, and Burns said that any sacrifice was an important being. He said Akataro Obi was a great existence that humanity would lose, but what they would gain in exchange was far greater. Shinra's eyes blazed with fury, his anger clearly visible on his face, and he charged at Captain Burns, asking if that is how he truly felt. He delivered a fiery scissor kick to Burns' shoulder, resulting in a massive explosion, but the captain remained unfazed. At that moment, Burns' eye patch burst into flames, and he gave Shinra a gut-wrenching backhanded punch that sent him flying far away. Burns prepared for his next attack, but unknown to him, Joker leaped high and was about to attack him. He delivered a devastating axe kick that destroyed part of the roof, but Burns dodged it, and Joker was seemingly unsurprised by it. They exchanged hits and counters until Burns kicked Joker, sending him flying far away. Joker's feet slid from the force of the kick, and Shinra stopped his slide, but he quickly disappeared again because he attacked Burns once more, though Burns blocked his knee attack with his fist. Nevertheless, Shinra made him step back, and Joker followed up to give him a combo attack. Shinra's fury was evident as he fought the captain of Fire Company 1, and Joker mentioned that the longer the battle goes on, Burns' heat was increasing, visible in the growing flames from his eye patch. Then, Burns used his Voltage Nova attack, which caused powerful shockwaves that sent Shinra and Joker flying, followed by an enormous explosion that shocked the white-clad member. Shinra almost fell from the building because of it, and was coughing as he returned to the roof, while Joker seemed to be okay. Burns' heat started at stage 1, and Joker said that as time passed, the more Burns' heat continued to accumulate, and the more his power increases, making it impossible for them to attack him anymore. Because of this, Shinra asked why the captain had changed and why he wouldn't even give them time to talk to him. The great predecessor, Captain Burns, had become an immovable wall, blocking their path to rescue Captain Obi, so they had no time to stop. Burns was surrounded by the two, and Shinra thought about what Joker said about how the captain was getting stronger and his heat was accumulating as time passed, which meant they had no time to persuade him. Captain Burns returned to stage 1, and for Shinra, in this fight, he had no time to wait and see where he was. Joker and Burns exchanged sharp glances, and according to Shinra, the scene of the fire is a desperate situation. He released flames from his fingers, intensifying them until they enveloped his entire arms. The flames gradually changed color, and he thought he needed to squeeze out power from his soul, or else he would die. In the next scene, his flames turned blue, and he gained what looked like a bandana with writing on his head, saying that the tension of the pressure of death was giving him a stiffened smile. He prepared to attack again, and for him, at all costs, he will survive. Meanwhile, Joker was saying that Shinra's shining blue flames were the type that was stronger and had a higher temperature compared to normal. Burns seemed to know what he was saying, and at that moment, Shinra charged, using his flames like jet boosters. In an instant, he was in front of Burns, about to deliver a devastating downward kick, but Burns blocked his attack. Nevertheless, Burns still lost his balance due to the follow-through of Shinra's kick, and Joker remarked that it was amazing how with just one hit, Shinra could move Burns from his position. When the captain regained his footing, he prepared to counter, thinking he would smash through Shinra's kicks. He threw a left hook at his leg, but to his surprise, Shinra released a burst of fire from his foot, kicking away his punch, causing him to lose balance again. Because of this, his flames grew stronger, and in the next scene, Joker threw fiery cards at him, but he easily deflected them. Joker continued his attack with his cards, but Burns just deflected them. In the next scene, Shinra was suddenly in front of the captain again, and he couldn't react, as he was hit by an incredibly powerful uppercut kick. Then, Shinra placed his left leg on Burns' shoulder, following it with a knee attack that he drove into the captain's face. Burns quickly ducked for Shinra's next attacks, but the next one to attack him was Joker with his cards. He said they should continue to press for an answer, and they attacked the captain simultaneously. The flames from Burns were growing stronger, and the anger was clearly visible on his face, which made Joker seem worried. Burns used Voltage Nova again, which sent Shinra flying, and Joker asked if it wasn't too early for Burns to enter Stage 2. In the captain's Stage 2, the flames from his eye patch were stronger, and his fire coat was also blazing. Joker said that as it's going, it wouldn't be long before they reached the point where they couldn't land a hit on Burns, and he hoped it wasn't too late. In the next scene, we move to Company 8 riding in a red truck, and someone seems to be left behind, with Victor telling Vulcan that they would reach Fuchu anytime now, and he replied that it was time for the raid. Hinoa said they were falling behind Shinra and Joker, so they should get ready. According to Maki, standing while the car was moving was dangerous, and wasn't the lieutenant always telling them that? Hinoa replied that they were rebels now, so it was okay to do whatever he wanted, even leaning out the window. They no longer needed to be reserved, and they were moving to destroy the great prison of Fuchu. They should destroy it with all their might, and as for Tamaki, she was wondering because she felt she hadn't become a rebel just yet, and Maki agreed with her, saying she was just getting used to being a rebel. According to Hinoa, they were too quiet, so they all said together that they would destroy the great prison. Back at Fuchu, some white-clad destroyers were watching the fight on the rooftop from below. One destroyer asked Gold why they would let Burns live if he had an Adala link. Gold replied that Haumea needed him in that playground, because it seemed she intends to link with a doppelganger. Then, she told her companions to prepare to intercept the other members of Company 8. The darkness of despair, she said, was the food that would guide that planet toward the sun. They would kill Company 8 along with despair, and while saying this, she made the slit-the-throat sign. Her companions imitated her, and one asked where Haumea was. Gold replied that she was still gathering the collective unconscious at the most sacred place of the Nether. We were shown that place, and Haumea appeared to be struggling. She seemed to be screaming in pain, with tears flowing from her eyes and liquid coming from her nose. Outside that room, her guardian Charon was waiting, seemingly having difficulty hearing his ward screaming. Yona approached him, and when he called out to him, he said he couldn't watch what was happening to Haumea. Yona said that soon, Haumea would enter the Pi decoding era, and that time was near. Sharon replied that as long as he didn't see her suffering, everything was fine. Then, we were shown Haumea, and she said she could see the world of the new sun flowing toward them. A moon with a weird smile, with blood dripping from its mouth, and a sun blazing like a fireball. In another place, Kareem couldn't believe the planet into the sun thing, because no matter how many great cataclysms happened in the world, no one could do that. He was in a park with Lieutenant Yin Li, and he added that such reasoning was the reasoning of a cult, so he asked Yin Li if he believed in it. He also asked why Captain Burns was helping the white-clad, who were saying such things. Yin Li said he was thinking if that meant the once-seen world of Adala was as fierce as that. Even still, Kareem replied, because he couldn't believe in something as making Earth into a sun. However, for Yin Li, they could only act based on their beliefs in God, and he was sure it was the same for Burns. Kareem argued that even so, binding up Captain Obi was weird, which made them both think. Let's return to the rooftop battle, where blue and orange flames were mixing, while Shinra was thinking about what Captain Burns was thinking. The fury was visible on his face, while Joker seemed deep in thought. On the other hand, Burns wanted Shinra to charge at him, but Shinra was thinking that the captain was a former fire soldier. So why, since his mother became an infernal, did he consider him like a father? At that moment, the flames from the rooftop grew stronger, and a destroyer mentioned that Burns' opponent was the fourth pillar. Gold said again that the other members of Company 8 were coming too, which one destroyer understood, while Stream said they would butcher the leftovers. On the other hand, Hinoa seemed to be preparing to attack, while Gold was saying that their enemy's plan might be to infiltrate using the fourth pillar's group. They didn't know where they would enter, so she told her companions to guard the back door. She said no one could enter from the front because of that wall, but after she said that, a huge blast made a hole in the wall she mentioned, which surprised her. The wall was completely breached, and from the dust up, Company 8 emerged, and Hinoa told his companions to find Captain Obi. He said they should crush anyone who stands in their way and not waste time. A destroyer told Gold that Company 8 entered through the entrance, and they mocked Gold for her bluff, which made her shut up. On the other hand, Maki seemed annoyed that the enemies had spotted them, and Hinoa appeared surprised. Vulcan wasn't surprised that they were found, and it seemed like a Western standoff was happening between Company 8 and the white-clad destroyers. Then, Hinoa told Vulcan and Victor to stand by at the back, because they will back them up, while Arthur should observe the situation from the vanguard. However, they all wondered where Arthur was, and Tamaki said that now that Hinoa mentioned it, she hadn't seen him for a while. Maki said don't tell her he fell off the truck while it was on the move, and Vulcan said maybe Maki was just joking, because if Arthur wasn't there, what would they do about the Vanguard? Hinowa said that was why he was telling them not to stand while moving. On the other hand, Gold said that since 8 entered from the front, it looked like they had no time to think of a plan, and the passage fee would be their lives. Then, Maki asked who would be their Vanguard. Now that Shinra, Arthur, and Obi were gone. Hinowa answered that it looks like he and Maki were up, but Tamaki said they had a Vanguard. She said she would do it, because she had high resistance to flames. Because of that, Gold increased their passage fee, and Maki said it wasn't certain that the enemy's attack was flame-based, so Tamaki should be careful, who said she would handle it, because even though her speed wasn't equal to Shinra's, she was more flexible. She also wanted to get burns quickly, so Hinowa told Maki they would support Tamaki, who had already charged at the destroyers. To support her, Hinowa started shooting at the enemies, who seemed unfazed by what they were doing. Gold stopped the bullets' movement and directed them at Tamaki, so Hinowa told her to move quickly. Tamaki avoided the bullets, and she was surprised when they came back at her. Then, Hinowa ordered Maki to take control, and that's exactly what she did. Gold said Maki was a powerful second-generation pyro, but it was pointless. Then, Maki checked on Hinowa, and he asked her how her evaluation was. Maki replied that she felt power from the enemy's right arm, and it was more heat than flames, so she couldn't take control. Gold said that they butchers were experts of anti-ability fighters, and second-gens were good, but not to the point where they could hinder them. At the back of the battle, Vulcan seemed to be wearing a VR headset, and he was asking Victor if he could see what he was seeing, and if he understood their enemy's abilities. Victor was analyzing Gold, and he answered Vulcan that they were on the other side of the wall, and the vision was perfect. He said that they could confirm sight of the enemy. But for the golden arm, they hadn't figured it out yet. However, he was sure he would find an explanation for it, because after all, Fire Force battles were about combat and analysis. Then, Vulcan told the three that he and Victor would back them up, so they should leave the analysis to them. Gold was wondering what Company 8 was doing, and if they were trying to consult them using money, but she said that even if they try to buy them out, it would be pointless, because cutting money was cutting luck. She added that she alone was enough to fight the Fire Force, even though she had 2 companions along. Tamaki got annoyed, asking if Gold was insulting them, but Vulcan stopped her from charging because he had already made her request, and they had no time, so that was all he could do. He handed them to Tamaki, saying she couldn't waste them because there were only 2. On the other hand, Victor was thinking about Gold's abilities, and it seemed he had realized something. Then, Hinowa told Maki and Tamaki to charge, and the passage toll was Captain Obi, the soul of Company 8. On the other hand, electricity-like energy was coming from Gold's right hand, and she said that wouldn't be Company 8's toll fee, but they would still lend her something. She was referring to the shield Maki was holding, which she took using her powers, surprising Maki. Gold added that using just bullets was insufficient, so she used the shield to repel Maki, who couldn't believe the shield was moving without anyone holding it. It came back to attack her a second time, but the Tekyo stopped it, allowing Maki to stand up again. Meanwhile, Victor Licht was still thinking about the enemy's powers, and his guess was magnetism because Gold could manipulate metal. He added that Gold's characteristic was her golden gauntlet, and Lisa asked if he was okay because he was muttering. Iris answered that Licht would think of a good idea, and in the past, Victor Licht's ideas had saved them during the firestorm and the underground fire event. She said Licht was someone who belonged to Company 8. At that moment, Licht was listing things about Gold, such as the golden gauntlet and magnetism with flame abilities. He said there was no magnetism in Gold itself, and an ability user, without any exception, had an ability connected to fire and heat. Because of this, he seemed to have realized something about Gold and heat, so he told Vulcan to stop any attacks using the Tekyo. At that time, Maki was attacking using the Tekyo, and Gold just stood there, unconcerned about what would happen, because when the Tekyo was in front of her, it suddenly stopped, which greatly surprised Vulcan, and he asked Licht what that meant. The scientist explained that Gold was creating magnetism using Gold and heat. He said first of all, as a property of materials, Gold wouldn't stick to any magnet without first receiving the effects of a magnetic force. Vulcan asked if Gold wasn't using magnetism, and Licht replied that was wrong, because the problem was heat. He explained that when heat flows into Gold, it has the property of possessing magnetism, and Gold's powers were born among the third-generation abilities, pouring heat energy into metallic gauntlets and converting it to magnetic power to manipulate metals, like bullets and tekyo that fall under the effects of magnetism. Then, we return to the battlefield, where some of Company 8's gear was floating beside Gold, and she said her assassinations used local procurement of weapons, and it didn't require money. Maki looked very surprised at what she was seeing, because their gear was flying toward them. The tekyo became a 1-2 punch attack, but Maki and Hinawa avoided them, and when Hinawa regained his footing, he retaliated by shooting, so Vulcan told him it was useless, because it would only increase the number of enemy attacks. In the next scene, Hinawa was hit out of nowhere by a metal pipe, causing blood to come from his mouth. He was surprised that Gold also used the barrel he had threw away, and it came back for round 2, but Tamaki arrived to hit it with her fire. Because of that, Gold targeted her using the tekyo, but she jumped around to avoid them, making Gold say she was quite nimble. According to Tamaki, they should continue confusing Gold, and it was time to use the handmade boosters Vulcan made. Maki asked what they were, and Vulcan explained they were fire amplification devices he made from mixed powder of iron oxide and aluminum. When ignited, he said a thermite reaction would occur, becoming super hot firepower. Tamaki created what looked like a large fireball attack, and she told Gold to eat her Nikomata extra large fireball. Vulcan was delighted by that, and the two destroyers accompanying Gold were impressed by the power of Tamaki's attack. She jumped and released her fireball attack, but it had no effect on Gold, leaving Tamaki in disbelief. Gold said that an average assassin couldn't endure that attack, since butchers specialize in ability users' assassination. So consequently, their fire resistance was high. Then, she attacked Tamaki again using the tekyo, and Tamaki told her she was the same, and Gold's attacks wouldn't hit her. However, Gold controlled her belt buckle, and she was hit by an uppercut attack from the tekyo. Then, it was followed by multiple tekyo attacks, making Maki worry for her. At that moment, the tekyo was about to attack Tamaki simultaneously, and due to her misfortune, her pants were stripped off. Nevertheless, she still managed to dodge, saying that was close, and her lucky lecher lure had saved her. Maki said Tamaki had gotten stronger in Asakusa, though her lure remained the same. Hinawa seemed to realize something, saying that the parts of Tamaki's Special Fire Force uniform were made of Hijima's heat-resistant reinforced plastic, and only the belt was metallic. In the next scene, Maki, Hinawa, and Vulcan also had their pants stripped off, making Gold laugh and call them pitiful. Hinawa replied that for people who had to strip for a nude calendar, this was nothing. Gold asked if they made money from that, and Hinawa said that because Gold lived in the Nether, she really didn't know anything, as that calendar sold well. According to Vulcan, Gold had stopped pulling away their bodies, but because Tamaki was alone for offense, they were lacking a trump card. He said they needed to do something about the magnetic force, or else their weapons would become useless. Lisa arrived and asked if it was bothering Vulcan, and what they were doing dressed up like teddy bears. Vulcan said it wasn't funny, and told Lisa to undo her belt. However, Lisa asked if Vulcan had forgotten her ability, and she used it. Lisa's legs became tentacles made of fire, and she called it fishing fire. She said her flames were a magnetic substance, so even slightly, it should disturb the enemy's magnetic force. Maki asked her if it was okay for her to fight, and she answered that she was originally a feeler of the Knights of the Ashen Flame, and she couldn't hesitate at a time like this. She added that even though she was an enemy, Captain Obi had welcomed her, and although her feelings might not be enough, she still wanted to save Captain Obi. Vulcan smiled because of that, and according to Lisa, she could earn them time, but Vulcan said to leave it to him. Then, he asked Licht if he had a plan, because it seemed he had thought of something based on how he was talking earlier. Licht smiled and answered that of course he did, because he was Company 8's science investigator. He said Gold was a third-generation pyrokinetic, so shallow flames wouldn't get through her. Instead of flames, which had no effect on her resistance, they will need the means of attack with the most effect, and Lieutenant Hinawa's gun would be enough for the finishing blow. He added that there was even a target on Gold's forehead, but to aim for it, her magnetic force was blocking the way. So before they could do that, they needed to disable their enemy's magnetic force, like stopping the magnetism emitted by the golden gauntlet using a ferromagnet. Vulcan asked if what Licht meant by ferromagnet was a material that could block magnetic force, and where they would get it. Licht answered it was all over the place, with iron. They would surround Gold's golden gauntlet with iron, but Vulcan reasoned that the enemy manipulated iron, and Licht knew that, so wasn't that impossible. According to Licht, normally it would be impossible, so this was a job that only the Special Fire Force could do. They prepared to fight again, and Gold was attacking using the Company 8 gears she controlled. One of Gold's companions asked how long she would fool around, and Stream said she thought time was money, so Gold should hurry up and butcher Company 8. Gold replied that the enemy had no options left, so that fight was over, and she used the Tekyo to attack. On the other hand, Lisa used fishing fire, and she deflected it against the Tekyo. She managed to disturb its magnetic field, so it didn't hit Maki, which surprised Gold because her operation failed. Lisa said that if the enemy got used to her magnetism, it's over, so she told Vulcan they had no time and to hurry up. Vulcan asked Licht what was the only method the Special Fire Force could do, and Licht said he would first give his instructions. First, Tamaki should prepare her flames, so she asked what he is planning to make her do. Then, Vulcan told Licht the setup was done, so Tamaki asked again. Vulcan seemed surprised at that moment, so he called Maki, and she replied she would handle it. Vulcan and Maki were holding metal bits, and Vulcan said they would start cooking. So Maki told Tamaki to make her tail into a pot. Tamaki wondered what they were going to do, and Maki told her not to drop what they would put in her tail. Vulcan said they needed to melt all that iron first, but Tamaki misheard it as belt, which Vulcan clarified. Tamaki started melting the iron, and she said her fire wasn't hot enough to melt them. According to Licht, to melt iron, they needed approximately 2,800 degrees, and he asked Vulcan if he can get it done. Vulcan said he would handle it, using the thermite law, so he asked Maki if she was ready, and Maki was ready. Tamaki asked them what they were going to do with her butt, and Vulcan threw the thermite at Tamaki's tail, resulting in a huge explosion. However, Maki controlled the flames, and Tamaki wondered what was happening. At that moment, the materials they put in were slowly melting, but the melting seemed slow, so Vulcan said the temperature wasn't hot enough yet. Because of that, he sprayed oxygen on Tamaki's tail fire, and she really felt it. She asked Vulcan what he was doing, and he answered that he sprayed high-concentrated dioxygen used for suction, and they would use it to raise the temperature to 2,800 degrees, but Tamaki was begging him to stop. On the other hand, Lisa was protecting them, and she was looking very serious. At that moment, Gold learned that Lisa was using magnetic force to hinder her. However, she said she was used to it, and while saying that, she used the Tekyo to attack Lisa's side, who asked Vulcan if they weren't done yet. Gold seemed to notice something in the reflection of Lisa's coat, and she asked what they were hiding from her. Then, Tamaki was shown with a deep look, having melted the materials, so Gold asked what that was. Vulcan praised Lisa, and he told Tamaki to charge. That's what Tamaki did, and Gold said if she wasn't mistaken, what Tamaki was carrying was iron. So while she continued charging, she said if it was iron, she could easily take it. However, she seemed surprised, because she couldn't control the iron Tamaki was carrying, and Vulcan said that iron exceeding 750 degrees changes properties, and won't receive the effects of magnetism. Tamaki threw the melted metal at Gold, and it hit her gauntlet directly. Gold was shocked by what happened, and she seemed sad about her gauntlet, while Vulcan said they had sealed off her gauntlet, so she couldn't use magnetism anymore. He added that if Gold thought she could stop them, then she should try. Then, Lieutenant Hinawa took his gun and pointed it at Gold. Hinawa was ready to shoot, while Gold was worried and still distracted with what Company 8 had done to her gauntlet. Then, Tamaki told the lieutenant to shoot, and that's what he did. Time slowed down as Hinawa fired, aiming at the target on Gold's head, who was pleading for him to wait a moment. Hinawa's shot hit her head directly, and she fell backward. As she fell, several coins spilled from her, and Company 8 waited for what would happen next. When the coins fell, Gold's two companions said she had been defeated, and Tamaki asked the two if they had seen that, because that was Company 8's teamwork, and even though they could fight together, they had underestimated the 8 too much. Stream replied that unfortunately, they knew nothing besides the art of fighting alone, then introduced himself and told them he would be their next opponent. He used the blow Ana skill, so Vulcan asked Licht what they should do now. Licht answered that he was starting to analyze the enemy's abilities, and Hinawa told Tamaki to be careful. Tamaki was about to say she would be okay as long as she had her flame resistance, but before she could finish, Stream's blow Ana hit her, which shocked her. She bled from that, and Stream said they were specialists and butchers of ability users with high resistance to flames. Hinawa said she was just like Gold, fighting them with something other than fire or heat. So Maki told Tamaki to be careful. Tamaki's clothes were torn from that attack, and Licht said that considering her wounds, Stream was using air currents that occurred inside the flames to create tornadoes or wind sickles, attacking with those. At that moment, Stream used Ana and Erika, and she sent the entire Company 8 flying with it. However, Hinawa was still standing, and he was about to shoot, but in an instant, Stream was behind him, asking him where he was aiming, which surprised him. Stream used Chris and Kate, leg attacks, and told Hinawa to die while casting the confident Erika. Maki worried for the lieutenant, but someone stopped Stream's attack, which surprised him and Vulcan too. Stream realized that the one who stopped her was also from Company 8, seeming not knowing there was one more. It was Arthur Boyle, the Night King, who stopped her, and he said he had no name to give to someone like Stream, who said Arthur could take her 4 beauties, her 4 goddesses skill. However, Arthur used Violet Flash, splitting her in half in an instant. Stream's body fell to the ground, and her companions couldn't believe her defeat. On the other hand, Company 8 was angry at Arthur, asking where he had been since they were already shorthanded. Then, they showed the scene again where Company 8 was leaving, with an arrow pointing to Arthur's leg that had fallen from the cart, which was what he told his companions. Then, he told the remaining butcher that it looked like he was alone now, and according to Vulcan, it was good that Arthur had returned, and Tamaki had done well on the front lines. Tamaki replied that she thought she would vomit from the pressure, but the remaining butcher warned them not to be conceited. At that moment, someone said from the top of a building that it was pitiful indeed, which surprised the remaining butcher, while Arthur looked up. The one who said that was an extremely muscular man, and the ground shook when he walked, making Maki and Lisa look scared. The man jumped down and landed in front of Arthur, who had a sharp and fierce look at him. The man said that before him, there was nothing he couldn't divide, and after him, there would only be utter destruction. He introduced himself as Dragon, and Maki told Hinawa to step back, while according to Tamaki, Dragon was completely different from the others. Dragon said if they wanted to escape, they should run away now, because he would take a breath first. On the other hand, Arthur seemed surprised that it was Dragon, and he said, "So you were here," to which Dragon asked if he wanted to become dust. Hinawa and Maki looked shocked, because Arthur's Excalibur was glowing with intense light. In the next scene, we return to Shinra's battle, and according to him, things were always like this, as Burns wants it, without explaining anything, being self-contained, and thinking he was the only one right. And at that moment, Burns's entire body was glowing. On the other side of the rooftop, Captain Obi was still tied up, and Shinra was furious because he absolutely hated what was happening. He asked why Captain Obi had to go through this, saying that if Burns hadn't stayed silent about the fire 12 years ago, they might have saved Sho earlier. He said Sho didn't have to suffer for so long. So why was Burns helping the White Hoods? And while saying this, he charged at the captain. Burns's flames grew stronger, and he answered that above all, he was a servant to be used by God. Then, the two flames met, blue from Shinra and orange from Burns, but orange prevailed because it deflected blue's attack. Shinra was thrown back as a result of Burns deflecting his attack, and he said the captain was both a priest and fire soldier, asking wasn't it a fireman's duty to protect people. According to Burns, he and Shinra were just humans before being priests or fire soldiers. Then, he told Joker that he too had seen the Adala that day when he saw it. He explained that he continued praying for the sake of their nation and that world. So he was intrigued about where their prayers went, and in that scene, we return to the past. Joker called him after he finished praying, wondering why he still do that. all while embracing distrust in the nation and that world. So he praised him because it was quite admirable. In exchange for one of their eyes, they saw the sense of incongruity in that world, and despite that, Burns was still praying? He asked to whom, about what, and for what purpose he was still praying. He also asked if Burns's left eye had gone blind too, so he told him to wake up. However, Burns just turned his back and walked away, so it seemed like Joker didn't like that, and he said that once again, Burns was being silent. Burns stopped walking and said not to put his actions into words, and that he was a priest working for God no matter what happened. He added that he would continue praying, so Joker asked him if he knew the word freedom. Burns replied, asking if Joker was really the one to ask that, as he was the shadow of Holy Soul and had no freedom. According to Joker, that was the reason why he wanted to be free, at least in his own way of thinking. Burns said he always believed in God, and the shape of his belief wouldn't change, and Joker asked even if there was no God. Burns answered that was right, so Joker asked if that was a painful way of living, because if there was no God, where were their prayers going? According to Burns, in the diary of Raffles the First's wife, the founder of the Holy Soul Temple was a being who impersonated Raffles, but even though there was no God there, Amaterasu saved the people. In that case, he wondered where the God they believed in was, because he saw madness when he had the Adala link. He said he touched an overwhelming answer, an overwhelming madness, and that was the end of mankind's destruction. Because of that, he questioned what his prayer was, and for what sake has he been praying for? Was it for his friends, for people's salvation? So he questioned again to whom he was praying. He thought his prayer had no desire. It's just an innocent prayer, with praying itself as the goal. And now he had found it, beyond what his prayer could reach. Joker asked if he had given up, and he answered that his prayer had no desire. Back to the present, and according to Burns, at last, he could serve the conclusion that was beyond his prayer. Joker said that was some awkward gerontocracy, but Burns reasoned that he would understand soon. For Shinra, he wouldn't give up, and Burns asked him what his wish was besides the truth behind spontaneous human combustion, about Sho and his mother. He said his wish hadn't been fulfilled even a little, and from that point on, there was nothing he could do. Shinra replied that he promised to become a hero and would save everyone, while Joker seemed worried because Burns had already ordered to use the bug on Obi, and he was blocking Joker and Shinra's path to reach Company 8's captain. Shinra's eyes widened in shock, and the white-clad member guarding Obi moved. While the white-clad member was attaching the bug to Obi, Burns was saying Shinra's wish will never be fulfilled, while Obi looked terrified. Shinra said not to do it, but he seemed too late because the bug was already biting his captain, and he completely turned into an infernal. He screamed in pain, and Shinra tried to rush toward him, but Captain Burns was still blocking the way, and he drove his fist into Shinra's stomach. He felt the full pain of Burns' punch, and Burns told him to just watch from where he was, but he still couldn't accept that his captain had been bitten by the bug. Obi's screams grew louder from the pain, and Shinra shouted that this couldn't be happening. However, unexpectedly, Obi didn't turn into an infernal, and his clothes just ripped, revealing his extremely muscular body. Shinra's eyes and mouth widened in shock, as did Captain Burns and the white-clad member guarding Obi. His muscles were so hard that the bug couldn't penetrate his body, and he shouted that imprisoning him was a mistake because his muscles were ready for this. At that moment, other members of Company 8 saw him, and they wondered what he was doing on the roof. Then, Obi broke the chains using his muscles, which shocked the white-clad member, and Hinawa recognized it as the most muscular bodybuilding pose Obi had done. Then, he told his companions that this looked like an emergency, so they should all assist Obi. They praised their captain in unison, saying things like he looked crisp, his cut was finishing, and his veins were huge. Someone even asked if he had been lifting the matchbox on his shoulders, and another called him Gundam, while someone else said his pecs could walk, and according to another, he was an insomniac. On the other hand, the white-clad member said he was manly, and opened more bug bottles, throwing them at Obi. They stuck to his body, but he flexed again, and the white-clad member could do nothing but stare. Meanwhile, Licht received a beep on his gear, and he said this was bad because the captain was getting serious, which made Iris wonder. Licht told her they needed to cheer for the captain too, so she started praying to give blessings to his muscles. Then, we returned to the rooftop and Burns saw Obi's flexing and realized that that was his super fire. However, he said if Obi's muscles weakened, it would be the end, so he needed to act quickly. On the other hand, Shinra called him, saying this was the time he would bring him down. Then, we moved to Arthur, who was sizing up Dragon, and he told him this was the first time a Night King had faced a dragon, and Dragon asked if he was intimidated. Behind Arthur, Maki and Hinoa backed up, and Arthur said that only a limited number of soldiers from those who can stand before a dragon, so Vulcan should step back for now. Vulcan followed the request, and Dragon seemed to be looking at them intensely and prepared to attack. He released incredibly powerful flames that surrounded the entire area, sending Maki and Hinoa flying. His dragon nature truly emerged, while Arthur remained standing, ready to attack, which surprised Dragon. According to Arthur, this wasn't an average dragonic pressure, because there was something different about his opponent. Then, he told Excalibur he would give it a title, the title of Dragon Slayer, and at that moment, he drew it out shining unlike ever before. Meanwhile, Licht's VR headset lost signal, and Iris wondered what shock they had just felt. Licht said the footage broke off, and on the other side of the wall, Vulcan was hurt, and he asked if Dragon had just breathed out. Then, he noticed something that greatly shocked him, and that was the light of Arthur's Excalibur with a black aura. Arthur charged, and Dragon just stood there unfazed by what was happening. Arthur used Violet Flash and delivered a huge Dragon Slayer slash to Dragon. After that attack, Arthur looked at Dragon, waiting to see what he would do, but he just stood there. The attack was so powerful that it reached the building behind Dragon, and all of Company 8 was shocked by what he had done. The remaining Butcher said to think that Arthur was part of Company 8. However, at that moment, before he could finish, Dragon delivered a powerful backfist to Arthur, which surprised the Night King, and the intensity could be seen in Dragon's eyes. Arthur was sent flying far away, and the Butcher said it was a shame that his attack wouldn't work on Dragon. Arthur was about to hit the corner of the building, but he noticed it, and he cut a part of it, stepping on it as he slid from the impact of Dragon's attack. Arthur descended from that building's corner, and it crashed into the red building behind. Dragon said this fight was rather interesting, because for a human, Arthur was doing well against him. Arthur then asked why Dragon used the word human, as if implying he wasn't one. His opponent answered that he was Dragon, which made Arthur tremble. He said it was funny because he was a knight, but while saying this, he continued to tremble. Arthur added that he was trembling with excitement, and he couldn't believe he was like this. He mentioned the words, "My Excalibur deals a one-shot kill, there is no second attack." And that's what he wanted to say, but when his opponent was a dragon, he couldn't say it. Then, he told Dragon that until he collapsed, he would continue to swing Excalibur, because he had decided to take this fight seriously. He kept attacking Dragon, but Dragon just dodged, and when he tried to hit him with an uppercut punch, Arthur's nose immediately bled, which surprised him, and he thought Dragon's dragonic pressure was the real deal. Arthur was committed to his barrage of attacks, but they weren't working at all, and Dragon told him not to just step back, but to mix in some counters too. After Arthur recovered his footing, he charged again, trying to pierce through Dragon's tough body, but he was an impenetrable force that didn't even move, and Dragon said if Arthur had done that attack on a human, he would have hit their heart, and if on an infernal, he would have hit their core. Then, he praised Arthur for his skills despite being young, but reminded him that he was Dragon. Arthur seemed more determined because of what Dragon said, and the plasma from Excalibur grew stronger, which Dragon noticed. Meanwhile, Licht and Iris were watching from the hole in the prison's front wall, and Iris said the enemy looked big and strong. So would Arthur be okay? Licht answered that Arthur's ignition ability's strength lies in his self-image, so against an opponent with strong ideals, his self-image only grows stronger. He also asked if there was anyone who could stop Arthur. Then, back to Dragon, who said that the power of Arthur's flames and the way he used them could be considered to have reached the level of a master. Arthur seemed to like that, and according to him, his sword was a blade, but before he could finish, the scene moved to Vulcan and Maki, with Vulcan saying that Dragon was the best opponent for Arthur. so that old geezer was unlucky. Maki seemed deep in thought, while Arthur continued to attack Dragon, who just stood there. With each slash from Arthur, he got more stupidly amused about the situation, and at the back of the battle, Hinawa was looking at his gun as if thinking about something. Lisa told him that instead of looking at his gun, why didn't he back up Arthur with it? According to Hinawa, he had shot many times, let alone backup, and he had launched many lethal attacks. Lisa wondered, and Hinawa ordered them to lower their stance, while Maki asked if they thought it was strange that even though Arthur's attacks were one-sided, he was the one getting injured. Then, Dragon said that as he thought, Arthur was nothing but a brittle man, which made Arthur think, and Dragon told him to rest. Dragon released his flames and took a deep breath before spitting out his Spitfire attack. Arthur just stood there, and in the next scene, there was an enormous explosion of flames as a result of that attack. They were all surrounded by smoke because of it, and they searched for Arthur, while Vulcan was shocked that Dragon just breathed to do that. Hinawa asked where Arthur was, and Dragon seemed surprised when the flames weakened. He saw that Arthur was still alive, because he was defending with Plasmental. According to Arthur, as he thought, the dragon before him was incredible, and his new power was shining in front of him. That dragon wasn't an average dragon, and he noted that Arthur was defending against his breath, and Arthur appeared to have a cape made of plasma. Hinawa asked if that was a plasma mantle, and Arthur said he would defeat Dragon and become a Dragon Slayer. While saying this, he delivered a horizontal slash at Dragon, but it still had no effect, and he was the one who bled again. Maki mentioned that whenever Arthur attacked, he was the one getting hurt, and Dragon said Arthur was so weak that he was hurt by a small scale. He was referring to the dragon scales on his body, which were coming off after being hit by Arthur's attack. Maki seemed to realize something because of this, but before she could finish, the scene moved to Licht, who was saying that he couldn't see clearly from afar, but dragon scales were like an infernal's body. Arthur said those scales were pretty terrifying, and Dragon smiled while enlarging one of his arms. It seemed even bigger than Arthur, and Dragon told him he did well for a human. Then, Dragon swept him away with that giant hand, sending him flying with flames. Arthur bounced on the ground like a ball, and the flames seemed to be pushing him until he hit the wall. Licht's eyes widened as if in a daze because of Dragon's arm, and he said that as he thought, just like an infernal, it was darkening and becoming more durable. On the other hand, Vulcan asked Arthur if he was okay, telling him to pull himself together. According to Dragon, Arthur was on the right track when he was strengthening his powers using his self-image, but he hadn't yet grasped Adala's power yet. Arthur wondered what he was saying, and Dragon added that with only one of the powers, Arthur will never win against him. And at that moment his body seemed to transform again, and Licht was shocked and frightened because he was making his body infernalize at will, which was impossible. Then, we moved to Special Fire Force Combined 5, and Captain Hibana seemed to have a headache because of the talking infernals, Miyamoto, the demons, and now doppelgangers. She put her glasses down and tried to focus to answer how these investigations were tied together. At that time, she was reading about the St. Raffles convent, and she said that convent where she and Iris grew up might be involved in some kind of experiments. She said the nuns burned because of artificially caused fire, and that might be related to the doppelgangers. In another part of Company 5's headquarters, Hibana's subordinates were talking, and someone said that Hibana had confined herself for quite a bit, and according to another, it seemed to be because she had obtained Company 3's files after Dr. Giovanni's disappearance. According to the Conehead scientist, their captain was oddly perseverant at those times. Then, we returned to Hibana, and she said that according to Conroe's story, doppelgangers were like demons that are mirrors of oneself that came from Adala, and these demons were trying to kill the real body to impersonate it. If they compared the demons to an ignition ability, then infernals could be considered people who failed to awaken their ability. Because of this, she asked if that meant there was a connection between spontaneous human combustion and doppelgangers. If they could ascertain the truth behind the doppelgangers, they might solve the truth about spontaneous human combustion. Then, we returned to Arthur, who was slowly standing up, and he told Vulcan to step back, so Vulcan told him to be careful. On the other hand, Licht said their opponent's name was Dragon, and he was stronger than they expected, but because of his properties, Arthur's true power might emerge. According to Hinawa, their opponent was extremely strong and not a normal person. So Maki said Arthur's self-image would only deepen and his power would grow stronger. Then, Dragon told Arthur to run, but he seemed even more determined, and Vulcan told him to keep it up, because this was the dragon he was looking for. Lisa joined in cheering for Arthur, and Maki said he would be okay, as she had never seen him this serious. For Arthur, at last, his opponent used extreme dragonic pressure, so the outer dragon possessed the inner dragon, which he called Dragon Coordinate. He said this was the first time he had seen it with his own two eyes, and at that moment, his flames were taking on shades of purple, and he added that his opponent seemed to have accumulated a considerable amount of dragonic experience. Then, he said it would have been bad if he hadn't found that sword and mantle in a crater, and Dragon asked what crater, because Arthur's riddles about a crater had no meaning to him. At that moment, Arthur's sword became extremely large, called the Dragon-Killing Holy Sword. Vulcan said Arthur should kill Dragon because he was the Night King, while Tamaki was telling him to do his best, and Licht seemed nervous. Arthur said this was the holy blow that destroyed dragons, and he prepared to attack with Excalibur. He delivered a powerful downward slash at Dragon, but to his shock, his Excalibur shattered, and a lot of blood came out from his arm. That was followed by an enormous explosion, and Dragon seemed delighted by what happened. The realization that his Excalibur was broken was just setting in for Arthur, and at that moment, he seemed to lose consciousness and collapsed on the floor. The entire Company 8 was shocked by what happened to Arthur, and Dragon mockingly asked what happened to getting rid of the dragon. On the other hand, Maki was telling Arthur to get a hold of himself, and Dragon added that nothing could stand in his way. He said humans were equal to dust, and it seemed he had completed his transformation into a dragon, while Company 8's eyes widened and their jaws dropped because of it. Then, the scene returned to Captain Obi, who was still flexing at the white-clad member guarding him. According to Shinra, if they were talking about Obi's muscles, there was no certainty how long they would hold out. Burns said they had no time, and at that moment, Shinra and Joker charged at him simultaneously. Shinra attacked first by throwing his whole body at Burns, but he blocked it, and Joker followed up using his 4-card skill. While throwing them, he said Burns couldn't escape from those 4 cards, and Burns replied that he didn't need to dodge them. Heart, club, spade, diamond, and all of them hit Burns. He lost his balance because of that, and planted his foot to stop his backward slide. Then, Joker told him he wasn't his usual self, and Burns answered that he would take on all of Joker's attacks because that was his duty. Joker said he was amazed at how inconvenient of a man Burns was, who said he had left the system and lived in darkness, and he asked Joker if he, who had obtained freedom, had changed that country. Joker replied that the one who would change that country wasn't an anti-hero like him who lived in darkness, but a hero, and at that moment, Shinra was attacking from above, like a nuke. Burns said to just charge at him, and he would fight him as long as he wanted. Shinra delivered an incredibly powerful heel kick, but Burns countered by using Voltage Nova again. However, Captain Obi seemed unfazed, just continuing his flexing, while the white-clad member couldn't believe that roof would be destroyed. That's exactly what happened, and the entire roof was destroyed except for where Obi and the white-clad member were. Burns's flames were at stage 3, and he said the weak obey the strong, and if Shinra proclaimed he would destroy the system, then he should surpass him. To counter Shinra's attack, he blocked with his right arm against his body and punched him with tremendous force, burning his fire coat in the process. Shinra removed his coat after that, and Burns said those who destroy the system wouldn't become veterans like him. Then, Shinra charged again and hit Burns with a devastating push kick dead center in his body, and Burns told him he still had a long way to go. Shinra used the Korna, which seemed to strengthen his attack even more, and sent Burns flying, whom really felt the impact of such attack. Something seemed to explode from inside Burns's body, and the fury was visible on Shinra's face. Burns said that they veterans were stubborn, and he prepared to attack. Shinra replied that new recruits were stubborn too, and while saying this, he dodged Burns's attack, and roundhouse kicked his face, which shook the captain. According to Joker, in a stubborn fight between a geezer and a kid, at any rate, that fight wouldn't end until the kid surpassed the geezer. The battle between Shinra and Captain Burns had become intense, while Obi and the white-clad guard remained above them. The surroundings were destroyed due to the intensity of their released attacks, but Burns stated that at that level, Shinra couldn't change anything anymore. Shinra replied that he hadn't even started warming up yet. Meanwhile, Joker was speechless on the other side. Shinra then positioned himself again to use Korna to launch a stronger force at Burns. Though Burns was hit, he remained unfazed and grabbed Shinra's leg, then lifted him. Using his left hand, Burns spun him around and slammed him into the walls. As a result, Shinra's head was bleeding. However, Shinra said if Burns wanted a few more rounds, then he would use his pyrokinesis ability again, spinning around using the flames on his feet. Because of this move, he managed to break free from Burns's grip. However, Shinra didn't expect to smash into the rock behind. Nevertheless, Shinra raised himself again and spun in the air using his ignited flames to attack the still-standing Burns once more. He hit Burns in the face and didn't stop there. He executed consecutive slashes, strikes, slams, and stomps against him. He hit Burns hard in the body and jumped to attack again. However, Burns raised both his hands and prepared to slam him to the ground with tremendous force. This prompted Joker to comment, wondering if his plan to defeat him was through accumulating energy. Shinra then moved away and thought for a moment. He knew his speed wasn't enough yet. He thought about the kinetic energy formula and said it was just mass times speed, and if he could increase his speed, then he believed no one could beat him in terms of firepower. Because of this realization, his spirit was renewed, and he attempted to attack Burns again with even greater speed. When that still wasn't enough, Shinra tried to increase his speed even further. Burns asked if that was all he had. He countered and punched Shinra in the face. The impact was so strong that it sent him flying. Burns grabbed him by the hair and lifted him up, then delivered an uppercut. Because of this, Joker became concerned for Shinra and prepared his card. In his thoughts, he reflected that change doesn't come from anti-heroes like himself. While referring to Shinra as a hero, Burns continued to punch Shinra in the face repeatedly, and seeing that Shinra appeared dazed, Joker shouted and called out to him. When Burns was about to deliver another powerful punch to his face, Shinra just smiled and caught it. He grabbed Burns's wrist and suddenly lifted his feet. He utilized the flames from his feet and directed them at Burns's face. He maintained his grip on Burns's hand while lifting himself up. Shinra had been building momentum to smash Burns's body into the ground. The impact was visibly strong as it shattered the floor, but Burns still wouldn't give up. He punched Shinra in the stomach, causing him to be thrown to the other side. When Burns started to get up, Shinra didn't waste any time and attacked again. He hadn't even caught his breath, but he knew he needed to move faster. He attacked Burns again before the latter could fully stand up. Burns commented that Shinra was just aimlessly wandering through life, just like him this fight. Shinra replied that if you don't know what to do, there's no option but to wander aimlessly. He asked whether Burns's intention was for young people to just play ball without venturing outside their flock. Burns responded that he had no idea who he was, but he accepted him with open arms. Because Burns said that, Shinra believed he just needed to continue until he could convince him. He would show him that he would become a hero. After all, he had promised when he was young that he would become a hero to protect his mother and his brother Sho. He would protect his family, whether it was Sho or Company 8. And for them, he was ready to face the world or even God himself. The scene shifted to a hallway where Sho and another white-clad member were walking. Suddenly, Sho trembled and became worried. When Arrow asked if there was a problem, Sho replied that someone was intervening with his universe. Arrow said it was an Adala link. Sho thought about his brother when he was a baby, playing and fist-bumping with him. He couldn't recognize him but was curious about the warm sensation he felt from it. He wondered who was interfering with his universe now. Arrow was surprised and concerned when Sho suddenly mentioned brother. Back to Shinra, he recalled the day when he came to his senses. He had lost everything. His family and everything he valued were gone. That's why he didn't see life as either cheap or valuable, because for him, everything was precious. Shinra wanted to become a hero who would save everyone, even though his convictions held true now compared to before. He then remembered when Conro thanked him and held on to his words until he found what was truly important to him. Back in the present, Shinra thought that there were people extremely important to him that he would never lose to. Though struggling, he was still determined to continue. He said he was relying too much on the pressure of death, thinking he was at his overheat limit. But he still prepared himself, while noticing that Captain Burns's flames were getting hotter and hotter, leaving him with only a slim chance. Therefore, he would give everything he had for this. The intensity and temperature of the flame he gathered was tremendous, and Burns didn't back down as he used Voltage Nova, Stage 4. On the side, Joker just watched the confrontation between Shinra and Burns, who both took the fight to a different level. A flashback showed a scene where a child was in a church. He was praying earnestly, even as his companions were being mischievous. The adults noticed him because of how focused he was on his prayer. Even when the other kids put food on his head, or when his companion held a snake, he wouldn't get distracted. Because of this, they gave him the name Leonard, a lion who banishes evil. He accepted it and responded with Latum. Raffles told him to engrave this holy calling into his being. When he was blessed, Leonard replied that it was an honor for him. Leonard Burns became his Christian name. As he grew older, he carried the responsibility of protecting the Empire. He became its claws and fangs, a lion who would avenge for the Empire to drive away evil. Even as he grew up, he remained devoted to his prayers. He made a vow that he sealed with prayer. He wished to become a servant of God. He wanted to become the Empire's lion who would banish all devils. Back in the present, while facing Shinra, he called him Devil and asked if that's all he's got. He blocked Shinra's kick and asked if that was all his aspiration to become a hero amounts to. He called out his name and said that God desired destruction. He stated that he was a servant of God and there was no other path for him to follow. Anything that went against that would be defying the natural order of the world. He asked if Shinra would defeat the old geezer and called it insolence. Meanwhile, the intensity of the flames Shinra was releasing from his feet grew stronger and stronger. Shinra declared that his kick couldn't be stopped, no matter who he faced, whether if it's him or even the Lord Almighty himself. Burns's entire body was ablaze and he started coughing. Nevertheless, he just gathered momentum to release an even more intense Voltage Nova Stage 5 that shook their entire surroundings. Burns's flames continued to rise, causing visible difficulty for Shinra. His flames were being ripped off by the extremely powerful Voltage Nova Stage 5. Shinra tried hard not to be swept away by it, but he knew it was difficult. Burns said that the evangelist was the voice of God in this world. He said this world would vanish and he would comply with that. When he grabbed Shinra, his burning fingers were visible, causing Shinra to scream in pain. Nevertheless, he said that even if this world was meant to burn, he wouldn't allow it. He remembered his deceased mother while carrying his brother Sho in the past. And now that he knew Sho was alive, he said not to worry and just wait for him because he would come for him. Joker became concerned when he saw what happened to Shinra and thought his condition was different now. Back in the hallway where Arrow and Sho were still walking, Sho suddenly looked back. Returning to Shinra, he was still stepping on Burns's chest as they exchanged attacks. He commanded to accelerate and wanted to dispose of everything. Shinra added that nothing could stop him from accelerating. Whatever conflagration or extensive fire might happen to the world. He endured Burns's burning hand pressed against his chest. He made the Corna sign and said his kicks would blow them away. Because of this, the flame from his feet became more intense, finally causing him to knock Burns down. Burns seemed unable to believe what happened as Shinra was still standing there. Their exchange of attacks was so intense that exhaustion was evident in both of them. Shinra was drenched in sweat from the burning fire. He had been sweating for a while now. All this time, the sweat he was releasing was different. He called out to Captain Burns, who was lying on the ground. Burns said the flames of this world were great, but his hope lay in their youth. When Shinra asked if he recognized him now even a little, Burns just smiled and said he had for a long time, but even more so now. He added that Shinra had become even stronger. Shinra was curious why Burns didn't avoid his attacks. and he replied that an old man like him just needed to accept youngsters like him who rebel against the world. Joker then supported Shinra and said that was a reckless way of living. He asked about the evangelist being the voice of the world. Burns clarified that if the world was destined to be destroyed by God, then all an old man like him could do was obey. His eyes could only see the destruction of the past. That's why he urged them to show him how they would change it and how they would overcome the world. After their battle, the smoke they left could be seen from outside. Haumea were just watching from the rooftop. Karen said it was coming, and Haumea agreed and said with a smile that a new pillar had been born. Shinra then felt something in his feet, an Adala link. Burns suddenly vomited blood, which shocked Joker. A horn emerged from his chest, caused by someone that suddenly appeared from behind him. The creature pierced Burns's chest with its horn. Shinra couldn't believe his eyes when he saw a demon with only one eye. He wondered if this was a doppelganger. Meanwhile, back where Company 1 members were, Kareem was looking for Hua Yin. When asked what was wrong, he replied that he had found Rekka's service reports and documents. He had looked through his past records since he started working there and what he did off the clock, and he noticed something strange. This made Hua Yin curious, so Kareem explained that Rekka frequently visited orphanages, and it seemed the orphanage where Captain Hibana and Sister Iris came from was used for doppelganger experiments. This meant Rekka was involved in the doppelganger incidents. Iris was shocked because in the next scene, Dragon revealed his true form. He had large wings, which made Licht realize he really was a dragon. Because of this, Maki took the responsibility to face him and asked the others to step back. However, Dragon asked what a human could possibly do. Hinoa became worried for Maki because of the intense flame dragon released from his mouth. Maki didn't expect the intensity of his fire and was gradually being overcome by it. She thought they would all die there, and she couldn't stop it. Meanwhile, Iris was praying earnestly from a distance. Dragon's breath was so powerful it destroyed the wall there, while he just stood there staring at the smoke that enveloped the surroundings. He thought he had defeated them all. However, he was surprised because when the smoke cleared, the Fire Force members were still there. Even Maki was confused by what happened. Vulcan couldn't believe they were still alive. And so he and Hinoa approached Maki to check if she was hurt. Vulcan praised Maki for stopping that blast, but in her thoughts, she was sure they had been hit by it. Dragon's flame left severe damage, and he wondered if the Evangelist's grace was the reason why that happened. Switching to Iris, she was happy they were saved and cheered for Maki. However, concern was evident on Licht's face because numerous white-clad members were in front of them. Even Hinoa didn't expect that when Haumea said it turned out well. They all faced the Fire Force members together, and Haumea acknowledged Company 8's hard work. As planned, a demon born from Burns has risen, so she ordered her companions to kill everyone except the pillars. Back to Shinra, he couldn't believe what happened to Captain Burns. Burns signaled him to stay back. He was coughing up a lot of blood, so Joker held Shinra back from getting closer. The horn of the demon was still embedded in Burns's chest, so Burns told Shinra to escape. He added that the rest was up to 5-2, Joker's old code name. But Shinra couldn't accept what happened. It was a demon or doppelganger that appeared, another version of oneself. So Joker reminded Shinra why they were there in the first place. They didn't know how much longer Obi could last. Because of this, Shinra stopped and thought about Burns's order to leave. They watched as Burns struggled and saw what happened to him. Burns had no choice but to pray. He said he had never prayed for a wish to be granted, but just this once, he hoped it would be. While he was still making the sign, a portal opened and took him. His only wish was for them to be helped. Shinra paused because of what happened, but Joker told him not to look back anymore. Back outside, Haumea said they were all washed up there, so they should dispose of everyone except the pillars. Hinoa said he would handle it. For now, they should go rescue Obi and leave. A white-clad member said Company 8's fight was over. Inca was surprised at how persistent they were, but Ritsu thought it couldn't be called persistence but rather hopelessness. Out of a sudden, flaming poles rained down on the white-clad members. A man up above a post called their attention and called them evildoers. He introduced himself as the Moonlight Mask. He said gambling and street fights were his love. Suddenly, he said, "Just a moment." The white-clad members wondered who had arrived. He then announced that his name was Moonlight Mask. However, because of the Matoi flag he wielded and his outfit, the white-clad members figured out that he was Benny Maru from Company 7. Again, he said, just a moment. He had just told them that his name was Moonlight Mask. In a flashback to his conversation with Conro and Asakusa, he was told that even though they were from that town, they couldn't become enemies of the Empire. Benny Maru couldn't believe he had to wear that. Conro added that he should fold over his happy or coat collar the other way around, and remember that his fake trademark phrase would be just a moment. Back in the present, he released controlled flames targeting the white-clad members. Hinawa called out to him as Captain Shinmon, but he only replied to hurry up and get the Matoi. Karen quickly jumped to attack him. He absorbed the flames that were released and used them to counterattack, yet Moonlight Mask remained standing. Haumea was the next to release flames at him, but Moonlight Mask was protected by a shield, which surprised her. Inca also joined in and targeted him, but none of their attacks were hitting him. Inca became curious about what was protecting him and noticed that he was controlling the heat within a 4-meter radius. When she mentioned his name Moonlight, he responded with just a moment and asked what she meant. On the other hand, Obi continued flexing his body while preventing the bugs from entering it. Joker's flaming cards could be seen flying in Captain Obi's direction, targeting the insects on his body. They were extremely hot, but he endured it since the bugs were eliminated. Joker approached him and praised him for his endurance. Obi replied that it was a close call and he thought he would die there. Joker urged him to leave because they were being surrounded by white-clad members. When he saw Shinra, he asked about Captain Burns. Shinra recounted the arrival of a demon that Captain Burns had dealt with. He couldn't protect him even though he had said he would take care of it. Exhaustion was visible on Shinra's face, and it wasn't long before he collapsed. Obi caught and carried him, realizing that Burns had entrusted everything to him. Shinra added that Burns had just accepted all of his attacks. Because of this, Obi said that Captain Burns had fought until the end for their nation, so they must protect it. While being carried by Obi, Shinra thought how relaxing it was to be on his big warm back. He thought the world and their nation should be like that too. Moonlight's Matoi appeared before them, and he told them to hold on to it because it was time to pull back. So, all members of Company 8 grabbed onto the floating Matoi. While riding it, Maki felt like a real witch. Hinawa called out to Obi. Meanwhile, Joker climbed up a pole and called Moonlight a strong man. He said he should pull back and that he would back him up, but he felt disappointed because the enemies were worthy opponents. Joker wondered whether they were dangerous to him or not, but Moonlight only replied that he wasn't sure because there was one dangerous person there. Dragon glared at them menacingly. Moonlight took his stance to use the first form of the Ei Chop, Kagetsu Fire Moon. Because of this, the other white-clad members got swept away, but Karen didn't move and just shielded Haumea. He simply absorbed the flames and gathered them for a counterattack. However, Moonlight was still protected by his shield. Moonlight was impressed with them and said they were monsters. Dragon quickly jumped to attack him, but he used the Ei Chop 7th form, Nichiren or Sunwheel, to hit him in the head. However, it seemed to have no effect on him as he said it was just like a bug bite. Moonlight commented that he really was a monster, but Joker told him to stop playing around. Moonlight jumped and used the second form of his technique, Geku Moonlight. It was so bright that even Dragon was blinded. Meanwhile, Karen kept Haumea behind him to prevent her from being affected by it. Moonlight used this as a distraction for them to escape, while Joker hung onto his Matoi. Despite what happened, Haumea said that everything turned out fine. When Karen asked if everything went according to her plan, she replied that in addition to Amaterasu, herself, Sho, Shinra, and Nataku, and now the other person, all the pillars had gathered together. Therefore, everything was complete. It was time to move on to the final phase. The day they had been waiting for was approaching. The scene shifted to Asakusa, where Company 8 members were heading directly while riding on the Matoi. The Asakusa people were on standby and noticed Benny Maru returning with Company 8. Conro became concerned and looked for Obi. He was actually behind Benny Maru, who had already removed his mask. Shinra was resting while being carried on Obi's back. As Benny Maru landed, Joker also came down. One of his companions was about to call him Moonlight Mask, but he stopped him. He said they had injured people, so they needed to help them immediately. When Conro asked if Shinra was okay, Obi replied that he was fine and his condition wasn't life-threatening. Shinra was sleeping soundly. Meanwhile, Arthur was lying on the ground, and they noticed he had serious injuries. Vulcan spoke to him and told him to hang in there. He said they had stopped the bleeding using first aid spray, but he needed treatment. Shinra was placed on a stretcher and sent to a place where he could rest. They said they would check on other injured members. Obi spoke to Benimaru and expressed his appreciation for taking them in. He said if he hadn't shown up, it would have been over for them. Benimaru replied that they had exchanged sake cups. He was curious about what was happening in the Empire and asked them to explain. Inside Special Fire Guard House 7, Obi recounted that the Holy Soul Temple and the Evangelist goons had joined forces. As a result, Company 8 had been excommunicated from the Empire. Conro told Benimaru that his hunch was right. He replied that he always had poor gambler's instinct. When he confirmed if it was true, Obi answered that Company 1's leader, Captain Burns, had become a martyr. Because he mentioned being captured by a demon, Conro asked if it was the doppelganger that Hibana had referred to. Obi didn't know why, but the White-Clad were trying to summon a demon. Conro commented that it was pathetic how they put a damper on the man-to-man struggle. Obi added that Company 8 would surely be blamed for Captain Burns' death. If so, the bond between the Empire and the White-Clads would grow even stronger. Conro said that was the worst possible situation. When Benimaru asked about Burns' reason for joining their fight, he wondered if it was because of Company 8's excommunication, but he thought that wasn't like him. The scene shifted to Special Fire Station 4. Ogun asked Captain Pan if this was right. When he whistled, Ogun said that first, their Captain Haig died, and now Captain Burns too. He asked what was happening to the Empire. He added that Company 8 were their comrades, so should they just keep quiet about what happened? Pan replied that he should relax, but Ogun couldn't accept abandoning Company 8. Pan whistled again and said he needed to listen. Pan clarified that they couldn't afford to have any more victims like those two. When Ogun asked what he meant, he answered that they would help Company 8. The scene then shifted to Special Fire Force Company 1. At the cathedral, priests and nuns gathered in a congregation for Burns' wake. Other members of Company 1 stood in front of his coffin. Onyago prayed for his peace, but Kareem said he was praying over an empty coffin. Huyen remained quiet at the side. Only Company 1 members were present at Captain Burns' funeral. He was said to have been martyred while pursuing the fugitive Akataro Obi, and his alleged cause of death was attributed to Shinra. Because of this, Company 8 had become total traitors and enemies of the Empire. While riding outside, Kareem couldn't accept what had happened. Huyen asked if he remembered Captain Burns' final words to them, and he replied that, of course, he would never forget them. In a flashback to that moment, Burns told them that he had lived a life devoted to prayer. And even now, that hadn't changed. He added that only they could change the world. Therefore, they should think about what would happen in the future, and he was entrusting his absence to them. He added that he was saying this because he was leaving and going to Fuchu. Back in the present, Kareem said that the old man was irresponsibly thick-headed. He knew Captain Burns was trying to change something. So, they needed to protect Company 1, the company their captain had built. It was time for them to take responsibility. When Huyen asked what he planned to do, he said there was somewhere he needed to go first. The scene shifted to Special Fire Force Combined 5. Hibana put on her jacket, prompting Conehead to ask where she was going. She answered that she was returning to the place where she was raised, and Kareem also planned to go to St. Raffles Convent.